people. Holy crap. What am I going to do? I don't know how to talk to this many people at one time during an OJ stream. I don't know. I'm on top chat. It's because Jude didn't say. Jude didn't remind me. Jude, we missed you yesterday. I hope you're okay. All right. Look at Dearden. Look at Dearden. He is acting exactly how I feel. Press and play. It's like, okay. You know what? Let's just peek real quick. All right. Oh, sugar. We are halfway through today. And we still have this FBI guy. I can't remember his name, and nor do I care to remember his name. It's fine. Then we have a 43-minute, a 2-hour, a 2-hour, and an hour and a half that I know for a fact this guy is still on the stand. So a couple more days. But then there's 3 videos. 2-hour, 1 hour and a half. July 7th, July 10th, and July 10th. I don't know who's on the stand those days because it just doesn't show. Could still be this guy, might not be this guy. All right, but I know July 10th in the last part, it's a different witness. And we really could be getting to... Here's what I think, and I don't know. July 11th, July 11th, the prosecution rests. That's what I think. Now, that sounds like a lot, but it's not, because remember, they have the 4th of July weekend. So, the courts are closed for, a week. So, we go from June 30th, boom, to July 5th. July 6th is a really, really short day. July 7th is a really, really short day. And then, boom, straight to July 10th. So, there's really only... We should finish June today. We're going to finish June today. And then tomorrow we start on July 5th. 5th is 2 videos, 6th is 1, 7 1, and then boom, we're July 10th. And that's when I think the prosecution might rest on the 11th. And then I think then the trial starts. Then we start the OJ trial. The defense takes the stand. All right, here we go. It's not muted, don't worry.
Trying to remember how many you said. You've indicated to us, sir, that you've worked on how many hair and fiber cases?
4,000 or so.
And what percentage of those 4,000 involve stabbings?
Well, many. A lot of stabbing cases.
And have you made certain observations in the course of the work you've done on those stabbing cases concerning what kind of hair transfers and fiber transfers you're likely to find?
Well, surprisingly, with stabbing cases, hair transfers between the assailant and the victim are not commonly found.
And why is that?
It may be the fact that it's at arm's length as opposed to a lot of direct physical contact between the bodies.
Speculation.
And you base that on?
Just based on what I've seen over the years, looking at the clothing worn by individuals suspected of being involved in stabbings and also from the victims. The best evidence that is seen many times in stabbing cases are the fiber transfers that are present on the knife or the weapon that is recovered from a suspect in a case. And that generally is the best evidence and most commonly seen, more so than hair transfers.
And in those cases, have you had occasion to examine items of evidence that bore the hairs that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as the hairs of the victims?
I don't know if I quite understand that question.
In this particular case, you examined the Rockingham and the Bundy gloves, correct?
That's right.
And you examined also the hair and fiber collected from those gloves, correct?
I did.
And you found hairs that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics on both gloves as those seen in the hairs of Nicole Brown.
That's correct.
And you found more of such hairs on the Rockingham glove than the Bundy glove.
That's right.
In your past experience in other stabbing cases, have you found hairs consistent with those of the victims on various items of evidence at the crime scene?
I don't think I can answer this question that you're posing based on past experience. I've seen a lot of different things. I can't be specific in this instance.
Have you ever had cases where you've found more hair on one item than on another that is consistent with that of a victim?
Sure, and it just depends on the nature of the contact. One can derive certain conclusions from the presence of hair evidence on certain items, indicating that perhaps more contact may have occurred with that particular item as to where the source of the material came from.
And as a matter of your expertise and simple reason and logic, would it be fair to state that an item of clothing worn for a very short period of time during an attack will be likely to have less hair and fiber than an item worn for a longer period of time during the attack?
Objection, argumentative, speculative.
Well, the shorter the duration of the contact, many times the less amount of material that may be picked up or transferred to another item.
All right, in your examination of the hairs and fibers collected from the evidence in this case, did you find any hairs that you found to exhibit the same microscopic characteristics as those of Ronald Goldman?
I did.
And again, were those head hairs?
They were.
And where did you find those head hairs, sir?
Well, there were hairs that were recovered from Mr. Goldman's shirt, which was my Q23, and there were also hairs recovered from the Rockingham glove.
That's a dumb question.
You
We could
indicated
just
you found
copy and
those hairs
paste
on the
that
Rockingham glove
every day, all day.
I did.
that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of Ron Goldman?
That's right.
And did those hairs appear to be naturally shed or forcibly removed?
They were cut and torn.
Then the hairs that you found on Ron Goldman's shirt that you determined to exhibit the same microscopic characteristics as his known hair, what appearance did they have?
They were both cut, torn, and forcibly removed. Well, they're all forcibly removed, but in the sense that some had roots, some didn't.
And how many of the hairs consistent with those of Ron Goldman did you find on the Rockingham glove?
There were 3.
3?
That's correct. Wait, excuse me. Well, I had several in my notes.
What does that mean? Several.
Well, it could be 3 or 4.
Did you prepare a chart to demonstrate what you saw through the microscope and what you based your conclusion on?
I did.
Now, again, does this just say all of the questioned hairs that you determined were consistent with a known sample of Ron Goldman, or only a representative sample?
It's a representation.
All right, this will be marked 477.
477.
Excuse me, counsel, over at the sidebar, please, with the court reporter.
For what? Did he take the board down in the wrong way? Who's he yelling at? For what? I don't understand. Bailey, he's talking. Dearden is not bouncing, so it's nothing bad. Probably something stupid.
All right, thank you, counsel. Proceed.
And this is People's 477. If you would step down, Mr. Diedrich, and explain to the jury what it is you're trying to show with these photographs.
Okay, again, these are photographs at about 250 magnification. The known sample, these 2 photographs were taken from the actual hairs that were submitted from Ronald Goldman. This portion of hair here that you see identifies from the Rockingham glove. This particular portion of the hair came from Mr. Goldman's shirt. Comparison over on the far right represents a hair. It's one of the hairs that actually came off of his shirt, and there were a lot of hairs that were on his shirt. The other hair identified from the Rockingham glove is represented by the bottom photograph. They certainly indicate a pretty good range of characteristics, from midgelated hairs, which have a dark medulla, to trace or discontinuous, and also the same present on the other hairs.
May the record reflect that when the witness referred to medullated hairs, those that have a dark medulla, he was referring to the photographs to the very far left, which is labeled as K1, and the photograph under that labeled Q3C, hair from Rockingham glove.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Diedrich, did you find any human hairs in the paper fold marked Q3A, which was hair removed from the Rockingham glove, that did not exhibit the same microscopic characteristics as either Ron Goldman or Nicole Brown?
Could I refresh my memory, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Yes, there was one short Caucasian head hair, about 1 inch long, light brown, that was dissimilar to the known hair standards that I received.
Was that hair naturally shed or forcibly removed?
It was a naturally shed hair.
Now, were the hair standards that you received that were taken by the coroner from Ron Goldman, were those naturally shed hairs or forcibly removed?
They were all forcibly removed.
Does that have any impact on your ability to make an effective comparison between questioned hair and known hair standard?
Well, it's much easier to compare, again, apples with apples, oranges with oranges. The hairs that are forcibly removed will compare better with hairs that are forcibly removed. The same thing is with naturally shed hairs. As a hair reaches the stage where it's ready to come out, it tends to look a little different. It often gets lighter. It loses a lot of the medulation or the canal that's found in the center of the hair, and it will look different. That's why I request combings as well as pullings when known samples are collected.
And did you have any such combings in the standard submitted to you from the coroner's office
I did not.
for Ronald Goldman?
That's correct.
All right, did you receive and examine hair samples from police and crime personnel and laboratory personnel that were involved in this case?
I did.
And did those samples include Detectives Phillips,
No,
Furman, Van Adams, and
Terry,
Lang?
that's sick.
I did, yes.
Did you compare?
You did that at 5 a.m.? I really hate owls. They really scare the poop it out of me, but that is sick. If I just turn my head a little bit, I can pretend it's a parrot, and I'm fine with parrots. But that is so good. I can't believe you carved that. Well done. Holy cow.
Their known hair standards of those detectives to this one inch light brown hair on the Rockingham glove?
I did.
And what was the result?
The one question hair from the Rockingham glove could not have originated from these individuals.
Any of them?
Not from the individuals you just mentioned. None of the elimination standards exhibited the same characteristics.
Your Honor, I have another board that I'd like to be marked as People's 478.
478.
And for the record, the title of the board that we've just asked you marked 478 is Elimination Head Hair Samples.
Yes.
If you would step down, sir, and take a look at this board. There are names underneath each of the photographs. There's one photograph for each name, correct?
That's correct.
And did you cause those photographs to be taken, sir?
I took photographs, yes.
And do those represent all of the all of the lab and crime scene police personnel whose head hair standards were sent to you for comparison purposes?
Right. It's my understanding that these people were either at the crime scene or associated with the evidence in some way.
And are these a representative hair of each of them? What is this?
It's just a representation of hairs that were found in the known samples from each individual. The comparison process that I talked about previously with the hair from the Rockingham glove was not compared with the photographs. The hair was compared with the actual samples. This is just a representation of the hairs of each individual.
So when you made your comparison, sir, you didn't compare photographs, correct?
I never compare photographs. No.
The photographs are just for demonstration to the jury?
Just as an illustration, just for the jury to see what I was seeing under the microscope.
with respect to all of these hair samples, did any of them even come close to having the same microscopic characteristics as the hair that you've described from the Rockingham glove, that light brown Caucasian hair?
Well, we're playing with words again. I mean, light brown is light brown, but microscopically, these hairs do not exhibit the same microscopic characteristics.
Sir, of all the known hair samples you received in this case from the police, the lab personnel, the crime scene personnel, and the two victims, Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown, and did you do your own as well?
I did my own, just to make sure it wasn't one of mine.
So you even compared your own hair to that one light brown Caucasian hair on the Rockingham glove?
I did.
Okay, of all of the samples that you compared, including those of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown, was there any one sample that did come close to exhibiting the same microscopic characteristics as those in the short light brown Caucasian hair on the Rockingham glove?
The only sample that had an area of the hair that was close was the known sample from Ronald Goldman, and that would have been the proximal portion of the hair only, that nearest the root.
And that hair on the Rockingham glove, that was naturally shed?
That was naturally shed, and it was about an inch long, right? And his hairs were about 5 or so, 5.5.
And you had no naturally shed hairs from the coroner's office for Ronald Goldman?
I did not.
Do people shed their hairs, I think you indicated earlier, naturally every day on their clothing, correct?
I've read 100 hairs a day maybe shed during the day.
Let me pose to you a hypothetical, sir. If Ronald Goldman, at the time that he was attacked, had naturally shed hairs already on his shirt, and then was attacked by the killer wearing the glove found at Rockingham, could that account for the naturally shed hair found on the Rockingham glove that did not exactly exhibit the same characteristics microscopically as those of Ronald Goldman?
Objection.
I've stated previously that hairs can be transferred either directly from the head, which would be a primary type transfer, or secondarily.
Lizzie
Hairs that are found on
Bordender.
the clothing of an individual may be transferred during that
Hatchet.
contact just as well, and it happens frequently. So the possibility does exist that that hair may have been on the clothing of Ron Goldman during the contact and been exchanged.
Now, did you find any of the hairs that are consistent with those of Ron Goldman on the Bundy glove?
I did not.
And could the Bundy glove coming off early in the struggle with Ron Goldman account for that lack of hair found on that glove? Well, what in your experience, sir, would account for the failure to find any of hairs consistent with Ron Goldman on the Bundy glove?
Objection, Locker Foundation.
Sustained.
All right, you did find cut, torn, and forcibly removed hairs on the Rockingham glove consistent with those of Ron Goldman, correct?
Well, they were cut and torn, and again, that's forcible removal. Those were found on the Rockingham glove.
Let me give you the following hypothetical with respect to the findings on that glove, sir. If the attacker is wearing that Rockingham glove and holding the knife in his right hand, which is the Rockingham glove hand,
Bill, is
and
that
stabs
you?
Ron Goldman
that
in the
you?
head and neck area, are those circumstances consistent with the cut and damaged hairs that you found that were collected from the Rockingham glove?
Objection, Foundation, speculation. Over.
Yes, they would be consistent with that.
Now, did you find any hairs consistent with those of Ron Goldman in the hair and fiber evidence recovered from Nicole's dress?
I did not.
Sir, in your experience, what is more conducive to the transfer of hair and fiber during an attack? One in which there is extensive contact with the victim, between the victim and killer, or one in which there is very limited contact?
Well, from my experience and also from studies that have been done regarding transfer and persistence of materials, the longer the duration, the more involved the contact, up to a certain point, the greater the amount of material that's going to be transferred back and forth.
So let me ask you this hypothetical, sir. If the killer, after having stabbed and incapacitated Ron Goldman, went over to Nicole and limited the contact with her to merely pulling back her head with his left hand in order to slash her throat without having any further contact with her body, are those events consistent with the fact that you found none of the hairs consistent with Ron Goldman on her clothing?
Speculation. Overruled.
Well, the more limited the contact, as I said, the less likely that hair and fiber evidence might be found. So again, not knowing all the circumstances, I can only go by experience, and you're talking about a time factor and a contact factor. The more limited the time, the more limited the contact, the less likely you're going to find evidence of a transfer.
And you're not saying, sir, that the events had to happen just the way I've described, only that it is a reasonable and logical conclusion in your experience and judgment?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Are you saying that the events had to happen exactly as I've described in my hypothetical, sir?
Oh, no. No, I can only go by what I see. There are some indications of directionality, but there's no way to know with absolute certainty the events.
6
Then on what
months
do you base your opinion that the
probation
events
for
I
you,
described are
Zach.
a reasonable
you so
conclusion
much.
based on what you
Thank
found in
you.
the evidence?
Objection. Overruled.
Well, the amount of evidence and the location of the evidence indicates to me that the directionality went from Nicole Brown Simpson to Ronald Goldman in that direction, as opposed to coming back, in as much as there's nothing on her items from Ronald Goldman.
Ms. Clark, 5 minutes.
Thank you. All right, then, as a very basic and simple conclusion, can you draw the conclusion based on your findings that the killer wore the Rockingham glove during the attack on both Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
What conclusion can you draw, sir, from the fact that you found hairs consistent with both Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman on the Rockingham glove concerning whether or not it was worn during their attack?
Well, it's clear to me, based on what I see and what I know about the significance of hair examinations, that that glove was there at the crime scene.
All right, now you also indicated that you received, well, I don't know if you did or not yet. Did you receive hairs? Your Honor, may I fill out the results concerning Ronald Goldman?
Yes. And you're referring to Exhibit
475?
475.
475, thank you. All right, when you first received the hair and fiber evidence collected in this case, sir, on August 8th, did you find any animal hairs in your examination of the evidence?
I did.
And did you determine what kind of animal hairs those were?
Most of the animal hairs were dog hairs.
Now, I think you indicated earlier in your testimony yesterday, sir, that you can determine the difference between animal hairs and human hairs.
Yes, I can.
And how do you do that?
By microscopic structure of the hair. The root is different. It has a different shape. The medulla looks different. The scale patterns look different. There are a lot of characteristics. They're pretty easy to distinguish animal hairs from human hairs.
Can you tell the difference between dog hairs and cat hairs?
I can, yes.
How do you do that?
Same thing. Just a lot of it's just experience and looking at the microscopic characteristics and looking at animal hairs for a lot of years.
Can you identify different breeds of dogs through your microscopic comparison?
That is
No?
possible to do, yes.
When you conducted the examination of the dog hair samples in this case, did you make any determinations concerning the breed?
I did not attempt to do that initially.
And why's that?
Well, I had no particular reason to do it at the time. I was focusing most of my attention on the human hairs as opposed to the animal hairs.
At some point, did you attempt to make that determination in this case?
Well, I did receive animal hair, dog hair standards at a later date, and using those hair standards, I conducted my comparisons.
But as of August 8th, you only had questioned hairs, that is, hairs recovered from the evidence?
That's all I had, yes.
No known standards taken from particular dogs?
I did not.
Can you say that a particular dog hair came from any one particular dog?
Unless I pull it myself, I can't.
And why is that?
Well, because animal hairs, such as dog hairs, did not possess enough individuality in their microscopic characteristics to say with certainty that it originated from that dog, let's say, to the exclusion of other similar dogs. For instance, if there's a white Akita, 2 or 3 white Akitas that have the same markings and have the same apparent hair color, their hairs may look very similar. So it would be difficult to say it came from one dog and not another.
So what does it mean when you say that this question dog hair has the same microscopic characteristics as the known sample collected from this particular dog?
Essentially, it means that that question hair or hairs could have originated from that dog. This is just another piece in the puzzle.
And you indicated that known dog hair samples were submitted to you from Cato the dog and from Chachi?
They were, yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-morning break at this time. Please remember all of my admonitions to you, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. All right, Mr. Diedrich, you can step down. Counsel, before we conclude with Mr. Diedrich, any comment regarding a proposal to view the crime scene one additional time? I anticipated a response by yesterday. Did not receive a response from either side, so I anticipate both sides are withdrawing their request.
Actually, Your Honor, I believe that we expected, the people understood that everyone agreed to it, and so felt there was no response necessary other than to pick the appropriate date. That I thought was the only open question, and perhaps I'm wrong, but the people would think it would urge the court to do so. I think it would be very helpful to the jury to get a sense of the conditions that actually prevailed as close as they can to the night in question. The only thing that we would ask is that we do so at the appropriate phase of the moon, which I think the court has already determined.
Well, if you saw the memo that was prepared by Mr. Byrne, but
And I
I
think-
have the feeling that there's so much unnatural ambient lighting that any phase of the moon at that particular location is probably irrelevant.
That may be true.
All right,
But-
what's the defense position?
Your Honor, after having gone back to the scene and reviewing it, the conditions have changed dramatically in terms of foliage, growth, patterns, and lighting, and therefore it does not properly, in our opinion, replicate the situation on the night of the murders. Since the jury has already been out once, and since it is a very costly and time-consuming endeavor, and it is our desire to present our case as quickly and as expeditiously as possible, and to get this case to the jury as quickly as possible, it is our position that an additional view is unwarranted and unnecessary, and we object.
Absolutely
Do you
unnecessary.
have any photographic comparisons of the location to depict the change in shrubbery?
No, we do not, Your Honor. That was just done visually by myself and other lawyers and investigators.
All right. Ms. Clark?
Well, had I known that the defense was going to oppose this, which is something they initially were in favor of, I think that we would have presented points and authorities to the court. We think it is the appropriate thing to do. The court can make the determination as to the change in conditions, but according to those who have been recently to the scene, as recently as this morning, it's my understanding that not only has the scene not dramatically changed, but it has changed indeed very little in terms of the foliage and the conditions in which the bodies, of the scene in which the bodies were found. So I would urge the court to, what we could do is have photographs taken for the court's benefit to review, to determine in its judgment whether you feel that the conditions have changed, or perhaps the court would like to take a visit to the scene. I know,
No.
and you'll have a motorcade. So perhaps it would be best if we submitted photographs to the court, but I think it is important for the jurors to see the condition of that scene at nighttime, which is really the representative condition of the scene.
All right, is that the only scene that you wish to have a viewing of?
Yes, Your Honor, it is.
So you would forego anything at Rockingham?
Yes, Your Honor, we would. Would the court like us to have photographs taken?
Well, it's either that or I have to go out there myself and look. I would prefer that you have photographic comparison of the two before and after.
Okay. Okay, fine. We will do that. Yes, I'm
Right.
sure if a court went out there, it would be a parade. So in order to
I think I could manage it. But I would prefer, since my schedule is rather tight between now and Wednesday.
Sure.
But I do need to make a decision this week
Okay.
and notify both the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department because of their logistics and staffing requirements.
Okay. We'll have daytime photographs taken because that would make it easiest, I suppose, for the court to.
So, well, the foliage is what I need to know.
Exactly,
Since
that's-
that's the representation.
We'll do that. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Sure.
Your
One of our concerns is the overlying tree foliage and the growth patterns of the trees as
I understand.
compared
I understand.
to the incident. Also, even though we do object to any view, if the court decides to have a view, we would respectfully suggest that both areas be viewed, Rockingham and Bundy. However, our position is that neither should be viewed.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's have the jurors, please.
May I ask you one thing, Your Honor? Just take a second. That if the court determines the Rockingham view is appropriate, given the issues involved, there is no interior issue with respect to Rockingham at night. And if the court determines it to be appropriate, it would be solely exterior through the gates, if anything, which we submit.
That's relevant to what Mr. Park said he
Correct.
could see and what Mr. Kalin said he could see.
Although they'd have to take the tarp down that's presently over the gate, because that is a substantial change in circumstance. And I don't know if that foliage is the same either, so
Well,
we got
we'll
the
get-
same issue.
That issue was nighttime lighting.
Correct, yes.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
You know what doesn't change with the weather and time? That great seal we have in California. That great seal stays constant.
Defense that I'm going to be using the board concerning the dog hair comparisons, but we are not going to go into the Chachi hairs, and so I've asked that those photographs be blocked out. At a later time, I'm going to ask permission of the court to either crop the board or remount on a different board the photographs that we're talking about. We're now they're covered.
They tricked me. They started talking. And then they just stopped. And as soon as I put my mouse over here, they're going to start talking again.
Mr. Diedrich, would you resume the witness stand, please?
Dietrich, that's his name. I won't remember that, but I know it right now. I'm
All
getting
right, Ms.
pretty
Park, you may
hungry.
continue with your
Chicken fried
brief
steak,
examination.
is that breakfast?
Mr. Dietrich,
Asking
when we
for
left
a
off, we were talking
friend.
about dog hairs. Did you compare the dog hairs that you found from the crime scene, the victim's clothing, and the glove at Rockingham to the known samples collected from Nicole's dog, Cato?
I did.
Did any of those dog hairs removed from the evidence in this case exhibit the same microscopic characteristics as those of the dog, Cato?
Yes, they did.
Which ones?
With reference to the Rockingham glove, there were a number of fur hairs that were found. I believe I need to go into some distinction here as to what fur hairs means. Fur hairs are the underlying soft hairs that form the underbelly, undercoat of animals. Guard hairs are the coarser hairs, the larger hairs that make up the outer coat, for instance, of a dog. So they're called guard hairs and fur hairs. The finer hairs, the softer hairs, would be fur hairs. And on the Rockingham glove, there were fur hairs. On the Bundy glove, on the outside of the Bundy glove, there was a guard hair. On the knit hat, on the outside, tan and black hairs, because the Akita also had black hairs in the standard. There were a number of hairs recovered from Goldman's shoes, pants, and shirt. All of these being white in color. All of these compared with the Akita known standard.
What is the distinction, if any, sir, between your ability to compare microscopically fur hairs and guard hairs?
Well, the best hairs to compare are guard hairs because they often give more color variation. They're also larger hairs to work with. The fur hairs have a little less value. However, when used together, they increase the significance of the identification.
All right, now the finding of those hairs consistent with those of Cato, the dog, in the area of the items found at the crime scene at Bundy. What, if anything, does that indicate to you with respect to the access of that dog to that location?
It wouldn't surprise me to find dog hairs on the items from the crime scene area if that's where the dog spends a lot of time, because the dog is going to shed hairs as well.
Now, you also found dog hair consistent with that of Cato the dog on the Rockingham glove?
I did, yes.
How many?
Well, I'd have to check on that if I could, please.
Please, thank you.
I have no specific counts. There were several hairs that were recovered from the Rockingham glove.
Okay, and in your experience, when you say several, what do you mean?
3 or 4 hairs.
Now, those were fur hairs, correct?
That's right.
So what is the strength of your conclusion concerning the fact that the hairs you found on the Rockingham glove were consistent with those of Cato the dog?
Well, the conclusion is that the hairs could have originated from the dog. They exhibited the same microscopic characteristics.
And did you create a board to depict some of the comparisons that you made between the known exemplars from Nicole's dog Cato and the hairs recovered from the evidence that would be the Rockingham and Bundy gloves?
I did.
These were not the only areas where you found those hairs, correct?
Well, there were a number of other hairs that I didn't photograph.
And you've already indicated to us where those were found. Those were the items found at the Bundy crime scene?
Right. Most of the hairs were from items from the crime scene. That's correct.
I have a board here, Your Honor, entitled Dog Hair Comparisons, asked that it be marked Peoples 478. Thank you.
Excuse me, 479.
479. Would you step down, sir, please, and describe to the jury what you attempted to depict in these photographs?
All right, the known hair sample from Cato, the Akita, is up on the top. You can see differences right off in diameter of the hair and also some of the microscopic characteristics. Hairs that are found on dog, I mentioned, could be fur hairs. They can also be the larger guard hairs. Dogs also have hairs that are intermediate. They go somewhere in between in size and microscopic characteristics, and they're termed intermediate hairs. This one may be leaning towards intermediate because it's a little bit larger. All same magnification, about 250 times. The medulla on fur hairs often may take on this characteristic, just broken up a little bit, as opposed to larger hairs which may have a continuous medulla. And quite a bit difference here in the diameter of it.
For the record, when the witness said the broken up medulla, he was referring to the photograph in the upper left labeled K54, and then as opposed to this or this, and he gestured to the two photographs to the right of that, also labeled K54 on this diagram.
Thank you. The bottom photographs, the 3 photographs, represent the glove recovered at Rockingham, both the finer fur hair as well as a hair that is a little bit larger in diameter and still probably a fur hair. These would be represented by photographs labeled Q1 and Q3C. The other photograph, Q7B, is a guard hair that was recovered from the Bundy glove. And it was compared, as you see here, with the photograph above it, which is K54.
Is that just a white picture?
So with respect to the
That would make sense, wouldn't it?
hairs you found on the Rockingham glove consistent with Cato the dog, you indicated that you found 3 or 4, you wrote several in your report, correct?
That's right.
Is the finding of such hairs on the Rockingham glove accounted for by possible contact between the wearer of that glove, the murderer, and Cato the dog, either during or immediately after the murders?
Could have. It could have been a direct transfer from the dog, or as I stated before, an indirect transfer from hairs at the crime scene.
That were, say, where?
On the ground, maybe. It would have to have been on the ground,
Have to have been on the ground?
or perhaps from one of the victims who had been on the ground and collected the hairs.
All right, may I reveal the results on the Trace Summary Report, Peoples 475 for Cato the dog, Your Honor?
Yes.
Could you examine that results board thus far, Mr. Dietrich, and tell us whether or not they accurately reflect your conclusions in this case?
That's correct. It's fine.
And for the record, Your Honor, we are now showing a photograph of Nicole's dog, Cato Peoples, 48.
Cold Star. It's not the Cold Star.
Oh, proceed.
Sir, did you examine, in your examination of the hairs collected from the evidence in this case, did you find any hairs that were not of Caucasian origin?
I did.
And of what origin were they?
From a black individual.
Were they head hairs?
Yes, and limb hairs.
And by limb hairs, you mean?
Arm or leg.
And where did you find those head and limb hairs? From which items of evidence were they collected?
Well, the head hairs were identified as coming from a cap, from a Bronco, a knit hat that was recovered from the crime scene, a Ronald Goldman shirt, and those were the items.
Okay. And where was it that you found limb hairs, sir?
That would have been the Rockingham glove and Ronald Goldman shirt.
And these limb hairs were also the origin of a black person?
That's correct.
Did you examine hairs collected from a cap found in the defendant's Bronco?
I did.
Yes, he is.
Peoples, 439, Your Honor.
We will get to
Now, what kind of hairs did you find
the other
collected from this
side
cap,
by
sir?
November.
Well, there were 2 head hairs that appeared to be naturally shed.
And what condition were they in?
Well, they appeared, some of them had chew marks present on them. They look like normal head hairs naturally shed.
And what does that mean, chew marks?
Well, hairs that may lay around for a while. And in vehicles, it's not uncommon to see hairs that have been chewed on by either a beetle or some other insect. They take a while to chew through them, so when we get to them, they just looks like a bite mark's been taken out of them.
And that's not uncommon to find.
Well, it just indicates that the hair may have been laying around for a period of time, as opposed to recently shed.
And did you compare the hairs recovered from this Bronco cap to the known exemplars taken from the head of the defendant?
I did.
And what results did you obtain?
Well, these hairs exhibited the same microscopic characteristics and accordingly could have originated from the defendant.
So you found hairs consistent with those of the defendant in a cap found in his car. Was that a big surprise?
Well, if that's his hat, it's not a surprise to me.
Sustained.
All right. You also indicated that you found hairs on the blue knit cap found at the crime scene.
I did, yes.
It was 56I, Your Honor, previously marked. Tell us what you found on the in the evidence collected from the blue knit cap that's shown in the on the screen right now, People's 56I.
Well, from the knit hat, there were a number of hairs that were removed, either by Susan Brockbank, who was the original examiner on the case, or by me.
You personally removed some collected evidence from this cap yourself?
I did, yes. The hairs were removed from the inside and from the outside. Shall I specify? Or do you want it just a total number, or how would you like it?
Let's start with the total number, and then we'll break it down. Okay.
There-
First
there-
of all, did you compare the hairs recovered from that cap to those of the defendant?
These particular hairs you're referring to, yes. I compared all of the hairs that were suitable for comparison from the hat with the known sample that was submitted from the defendant, yes.
And of the hairs recovered from the cap, you indicated already that you found hairs of the defendant that had the same microscopic characteristics. Can you tell us,
I'm not trying to stress you out. I'm trying to help you. This is not meant to cause stress, even though it's going to cause stress. But it could be helpful if you listen. You listen to me right now. sometime today, go out and buy one or two Christmas presents and put them in your closet where the cats can't get them. And then go about your day. Don't think about it. Don't stress about it. Don't just go buy two Christmas presents, put them in your closet, and then finish the rest of your Sunday like you were going to anyway.
First of all, how many overall head hairs did you find that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics in that cap as the defendant's hair?
Well, there were 12 hairs.
All right, can you describe for us some of the microscopic characteristics that you compared between the questioned hairs recovered from that blue knit cap to the defendant's hair?
I could read you some of my notes if that would make any sense. Okay, thanks.
I hope it will.
Okay, the known sample from the defendant consisted of numerous dark brown head hairs with roots. Most of the hairs were under 1 inch in length. The cuticle on the hair was medium thick. And again, some of these distinctions of medium, thin, and thick are just arbitrary based on how I saw them and how I perceived them. The inner definition of the cuticle was fair to poor, so sometimes you could see the definition, sometimes you couldn't. It was clear, there's no apparent color. The scale protrusion was slight. They exhibited blunt tips, had elongate pigment. The pigment granules were somewhat elongate. The clumping was not present in a lot of the hairs, and that's a characteristic, as I mentioned before, of black individuals.
You say clumping?
Clumping of the pigment, yes. Some black individuals have heavy clumping, others don't. And in some hairs within a sample, some may be more clumpier than others. So, the pigment granules were a medium size. The streaking was a very prominent characteristic. Streak in the sense that the pigment granules line themselves up in rows, and it appears that you have streaks within the cortex. Some of the hairs indicated a coarseness of the cellular material in the middle of the hair. Some of the hairs were patchy. Probably the most prominent characteristic of the hair sample, two being the color, being the lighter brown coloration, and one-sided pigmentation, which was a very prominent characteristic.
What do you mean by that? A very prominent characteristic?
Well, some hairs become distinctive as to how the pigment granules arrange themselves in the hair. In some individuals, and it may not depend necessarily on race, that the pigment granules will find themselves more to one side of the hair than the other, so that when you look at it microscopically, it just looks darker on one side of the hair. The ovoid bodies that were present were small and not very many. The cortical fusi were sparse, and most of them were located down near the proximal end or nearest to where the root is. And that in itself is not necessarily significant. The medulla was absent to trace, and I mentioned before the brownish, reddish-brown coloration in the known sample. And that's how I described them.
Okay. Now, those characteristics that you've just listed off to us, those were notes that you took as to the known standard recovered from the defendant's head by Susan Brockbank, correct?
That was my observations as I examined the known standard of hairs from the defendant under the microscope.
Did you see those same characteristics in the hairs that that were recovered from the blue knit ski cap, which you determined were consistent with those of the defendant?
Yes, I did. That's correct.
Now, those hairs that you determined were consistent with those of the defendant, were they naturally shed or forcibly removed?
Well, they were either naturally shed or they didn't have a root.
What does that mean?
This means that I mentioned before that black hairs often will break. They tend to be a little more brittle, and the cross-sectional shape is somewhat more flattened. It's not uncommon to see hair fragments in that racial group.
And when you said hair fragments, well, you also found hair fragments of Ron Goldman in the evidence, correct?
I did.
Okay. And were all of the hairs that were consistent with those of the defendant fragments, or were any full length?
No, there were a number of hairs that were full length. That is, they had a root, as if they were naturally shed hairs.
Now, did you also find hairs of black origin that did not match those, that were not consistent with those of the defendant?
I did.
And where were they found?
Again, I'd have to refer to my notes to be specific on that. And again, they would have been on the knit hat, either from the interior, and again, from the interior, I believe most of those were. The slides that were prepared by Susan Brockbank included our Q9 through Q19. Q9 through Q14 were from the interior of the hat, and there were apparently treated black head hairs found on several of the items, as well as other head hairs, other black head hairs that did not exhibit the same characteristics.
Now, the hairs that were found inside the cap that were not consistent with those of the defendant, were they full length or were they fragments?
No, they were fragments.
And how many of those fragments were there?
Could I refer to another set of notes? Thanks. There were 6.
Six? See, maybe I'm wrong, sir. I took notes from your notes, and I counted, based on your notes, I counted 7. Can you tell?
Sustained.
I'm
Excuse me, guys.
Yeah, guys. You heard Ito.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Guys. That
Did you just
means,
count them, sir?
Nan, you're
You
safe.
could be right. I mean, I counted 6 in the first batch. I can recheck if you want, if it makes a difference, if there's 6 or 7.
All right, let's assume for now. Well, maybe I can't do that. Go ahead and look. I was going to say assume there's 7, but go ahead and look, sir.
Well, we might as well assume OJ did it while we're assuming.
Some were treated.
Right. Some were treated.
Now, the conclusions that you drew concerning those 6 fragments inside the cap, were those based on your comparison of them with the known hair standard given you from the defendant?
That's correct.
Do you know how long those 6 fragments could have been on that ski cap?
No, I have no idea.
Do a person's hair characteristics change over time?
Yes, they do.
In what way?
Well, in many ways, depending on what they do to their hair, what type of environment they're exposed to, how much sunlight they get, if they treat their hair. There's just a lot of different things that could happen to hair besides the natural effects of age also.
Okay, so you cannot tell us at this time whether those 6 fragments found inside the cap could have been hairs deposited by the defendant 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Speculation.
No, as I said, there's no way to say how long those hairs have been in that location on that item.
Is it uncommon in your experience? Is it uncommon in your experience, sir, in examining clothing, to find hairs that are not consistent with the hairs of the owner or wearer of that clothing?
Objection, calls for speculation.
It's not uncommon. I mean, it's not uncommon to find hairs on one's clothing that's submitted for examination that do not exhibit the same characteristics as that person's hairs.
And that's because?
Well, that's why I look at the stuff in the first place. If 2 people had physical contact, I look at the clothing to see if there's anything on the clothing of one individual, say the victim, that doesn't look like the victim's hairs. If it doesn't look like the victim's hairs, then who could it be from? Possibly a suspect? Possibly. And that's why I do it.
Now, the only hairs on that cap that did not match the known sample of the defendant is the fragments, the 6 fragments that you described,
That's right.
and all the naturally shed hairs with roots from that cap were consistent with those hairs from the defendant.
They were.
Did you also ask for known hair samples from African American police and lab personnel in order to compare their hairs to those fragments that you found of black origin inside the ski cap?
I did.
And that was, were those hairs depicted on the elimination standards board we saw earlier?
Yes, they were.
It's 478. Can you please point out to us, sir, on this board, which of the photographs depict hairs of the African American lab and crime scene police personnel?
Sandra Claiborne, Jean Braggs, Claudine Radcliffe, Don Thompson. I believe those were the individuals.
Thank you, sir. And for the record, he was gesturing to the photographs that bear those names on People's 478, Your Honor.
Yes.
And none of the individuals that you've described whose samples are depicted by a photograph on this board had hair that was consistent with the 6 fragments you found inside the ski cap.
No, the hairs that were recovered from the knit hat could not have originated from these individuals.
Now, sir, did you find...
I was about to go off on that, but you know what? It doesn't even matter. It's just stupid. It's just all around stupid. That was the whole point of the board then, I guess. That was
Sir, did you find
stupid.
any Caucasian head hairs collected from that blue knit ski cap that were inconsistent with the known hair standards of Ronald Goldman and Nicole Brown?
There were 2 hairs that were recovered from my Q15, which was from the outside of the hat, which was a dyed head hair fragment exhibiting Caucasian characteristics, and from Q19, which was again from the outside of the cap. There was a light brown Caucasian head hair, which was broken at the proximal end. It had treatment on the hair at the distal end. It was about 3 inches long, and it was not like the victims.
Now, with respect to all of the hair evidence that we are discussing today, sir, that was recovered from the evidence in this case, can you tell us when the hairs that you compared were deposited on those items of evidence?
You're asking about all the hairs?
In general. In general, for example, let me ask you this, to make it a little easier. The hairs recovered from the blue knit ski cap, can you tell us when any of those hairs were deposited on that item?
No, I cannot.
And with respect to the hairs found on the Rockingham and Bundy gloves, can you tell us when those hairs that you compared to the known hair standards in this case were deposited on those items of evidence?
There's no way to look at the hairs and make that determination. However, from a persistence standpoint, it would indicate that they had not been there long.
And what do you mean by a persistent standpoint, sir? And
Well-
why do you draw a distinction between those gloves and the knit cap?
Well, with regards to a knit cap, it's something that may accumulate hairs over time. And a pair of gloves, the surface of the gloves is not conducive to retaining hairs for any length of time, so that they would tend to lose hairs very easily unless there might be some blood or some other material that's present on the surface of the gloves to cause the hairs to stick or to adhere. So some items would more likely lose hairs and they wouldn't keep them very long. Some items tend to hold on to hairs a little bit longer, such as a knit hat would tend to hold on to things longer.
Now, with respect to the hairs that you looked at on the Rockingham and Bundy gloves, did any of them have a bloody appearance to you?
I'd have to check on that to be sure.
Why don't we come back to that?
Okay.
Or would you rather check now?
Well, if you can wait, I'll check.
I'll wait.
On, shall I speak when I find the hairs?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, on Q1, which was the Rockingham glove, there was blood on the surface of the apparent blood present on the surface of the hair that were consistent with Nicole Brown Simpson. That was the only thing reflected in the notes.
Thank you, sir. All right, now, getting back to those 12 hairs on the blue knit cap that you indicated exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant. Did you have photographs taken of some of the hairs, a representative sampling of the hairs from that ski cap that you determined were consistent with those of the known standard of the defendant?
Most of the individual hairs were photographed, I believe, except for one of the hairs that I removed from the knit hat myself. So there should be about 12 pictures.
All right, those people's 480?
480?
480?
Thank you. All right, so you indicated earlier that some of the hairs that you found to exhibit the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant came from inside the hat and some came from outside the hat.
That's correct.
If you would, sir, please indicate on each of the photos now in 480 being shown to the jury which of those hairs was found inside and which was found outside.
Q8A, which is on the lower left-hand portion of the chart, was from the inside. All of these first four pictures on the bottom. On 8C, I'm not sure where 8C came from, inside or outside. It was unclear.
Because
Well, there was no indication to me. It may have been from the bag, so there's no way to know. And that's the photograph on the lower right-hand portion of the exhibit.
so Q8A, and for the record, Your Honor, we're referring to the bottom row of
Yes.
photographs, so labeled.
Thank you.
Okay, so for Q8A, those were all inside.
Right, there were four head hairs, and two of these were naturally shed.
What can you tell us about the appearance of those four hairs, sir, Q8A, found inside the knit ski cap?
Well, there was some range, as you can plainly see, from a much coarser hair, again pointing out that one-sided pigmentation that I mentioned previously.
And with respect to the hair, let me describe the position on the photograph, on the diagram. The photograph pointed to by Mr. Diedrich at this point was the fourth photograph from the left, bottom row.
And also we had some of the finer hairs that were represented in the known standard of the defendant were found in this particular item, Q8A, which would be the
If that
the
song
first,
was before your
first
time,
three
you didn't
photographs
do
on the
it.
lower portion of the chart.
And could you tell us, sir, did any of those hairs, of those four hairs in Q8A have roots?
Two of them did. There were two naturally shed hairs off of Q8A.
Did any of those hairs have a bloody appearance?
Could I refer to my notes? Yes, there was an indication of possible blood on the surface of the two hairs that indicated that they had fallen out naturally. Q8A.
And when you say indicate they'd fallen out naturally, were those the ones that had roots?
They're the ones that had roots, right.
Now, Q8C, which is also depicted as the last photograph as you face from left to right, was that hair recovered from the bag containing the hat?
That was, yes, from the bag.
And was that a hair with a root or a hair fragment?
That was a fragment.
Now, if you could, sir, please describe are there any other characteristics that you have not pointed out that you'd like to point out to the jury that caused you to come to the conclusion that the defendant's hairs exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those recovered from the blue knit cap?
Well, I've gone over a little bit of the process involved in trying to determine if a question hair originated from an individual. And one of the ways to do that when you have multiple hairs is to look at the range of the question hairs and see if the same range is exhibited by the known hairs. And if you can look at the known hair samples that were photographed on the upper portion of the chart, I chose hairs that exhibited a similar appearance as to the characteristics that hair exhibited. Whether it was coarse and dark with one-sided pigmentation, whether it was lighter with one-sided pigmentation, or if it was fine and exhibited the same coloration and diameter and internal characteristics. And again, we're looking at just a very small portion of both question hair and known hair.
When you say we're looking at just a small portion, you mean that's what the jury is seeing right now. You saw more?
Well, the comparison that I do involves the entire hair. And I chose a portion of the hair to demonstrate the association.
All right. Thanks. Would it be all right, Your Honor, if we showed the board to the corners of the jury, because I don't think they're getting as good a view. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
One, Your Honor.
People's 41.
All right, Mr. Dietrich, if you wouldn't mind stepping down to explain to the jury what's depicted in these photographs. You indicated, I think we've seen some of the hairs recovered from the inside of the cap, which you determined to be consistent with those of the defendants. And what do these photographs depict?
Well, these are additional hairs taken from Q10 on the lower left, Q13, which is the second photograph on the bottom, Q14, third photograph, Q18, and Q47.
Can you tell us, sir, which of these photographs depict hairs recovered from the inside of the knit cap?
Well, Q47 came from the inside, which was one of the hairs that I removed. I'm sorry, what was the first number down there?
Bobby, do you want me to pause it till you come back?
Q10 was from the interior.
Somebody.
Q13 was from the interior.
No, we have to get
14
through
was from
this,
the
Bobby.
interior.
You're just gonna have to miss out
Q18
on this riveting,
exterior.
riveting hair case.
All right. Q23?
Q23 came from Ronald Goldman's shirt.
All right, so of the hairs from the blue knit cap, Q10, 13, and 14 and Q47 were all hairs recovered from the inside of the knit cap that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant.
That's correct.
And Q18 was from the exterior of the knit cap.
That's right.
Can you describe for us, sir, you said you recovered Q47 yourself?
There were two hairs from Q47, and I photographed one of the hairs.
We see that one that you photographed here on the board.
That's right.
Those two hairs that you found that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant that you labeled
Anybody
Q47.
know
Can you describe
how,
where they were in the
like phones these days, you know how they can zoom in real far, right? We should all take hair pictures with our phone, zoomed in real far, and make a board in Discord and see if people can guess the hair. We would have to send all our hair pictures to one person, and then they would have to put it in a chart. And then I guess we would have to know who sent pictures, because there's 600 some people in Discord. So, but we would have to. I mean, it would depend on how many people sent a picture. When I ask people to do something really, really, really fun, I'm usually the only one that ends up doing it. Remember that one guy I said we should all send him a Christian inspirational quote? It was a meme. We were all supposed to send this one person a Christian inspirational quote in Discord one night. To just that person woke up the next day with one person who sent them a Christian inspirational quote. Yeah, it was only me, just me. So I just looked weird. He was like, okay. So I'm not sending no pictures of my hair until someone else does first. I learned my lesson from y'all. Y'all ain't gonna do it. I'm just gonna end up looking weird with pictures of my hair on my phone. But I do use my phone sometimes for weird pictures like that. Like if I see if I think there's like something maybe on my back or something, I can't see my back. And even the mirror, I can't see it right. So I'll take my phone and I'll take a picture of like in between my shoulder blades or right behind my ear or the back of my neck or something stupid like that to see if there's, what's going on. And I have pictures like that in my phone. It would be really hard though because you guys see like you can see Monica's hair, you can see Bobby's hair in there, you can see Anna's hair a little bit, but it would be really hard for us to be able to know some hairs because we've never seen these people, never seen their pictures. We would not be able to guess the hair for people. Okay. New game. Forget the hair. And even the people who said it won't be able to know it was them. What I should do today is take a couple hours and go back in time and find one epic chat from each of you and put them in a list or a board or a chart or a graph or a pie, whatever, and put that in Discord and then have people guess who said what. That would be funny and fun. Because even you guys who've said the thing, who chatted the things yourself, probably won't remember you said that. If I go back a year or two, even a month or two, we won't remember who said what. That would be a fun game to play. Name that chat. Yeah. I would have to do it on the main live, not on the OJ live, because that's not fair, it's just not fair. I'm thinking about it. We might do that. I'm thinking about it. I just need time.
The hat when you found them.
Well, they were actually part of the fabric. After turning the hat inside out and looking at the hat very closely under magnification, I had to actually pull the hairs out from the yarns. It happens sometimes if the hairs have been in there for a period of time that they tend to become actually part of the fabric. Very difficult to see because the hat was dark.
And what kind of hairs were they? Were they fragments, hairs, forcibly removed?
They were naturally shed hairs.
Which means that
They had a root,
both of them?
both of them.
So how many hairs total that you found to exhibit the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant were found inside the knit cap?
from the inside of the knit cap, there were 4 hairs off of Q8A. 1 from Q10, that's 5. Q13 makes 6. Q14 makes 7. There were 7.
What about Q47?
I'm sorry, 9. You're right. Apologize.
Okay. Q8C that we indicated came from the bag containing the cap, could that have come from the inside?
You could have. I don't know where it came from.
So 9, possibly 10 hairs found inside the knit cap exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those hairs of the defendant.
That's right.
What about on the outside of the knit cap?
Well, on the outside, there was a full-length hair with a root, which was Q8B1, and also Q18.
Can you describe for us, sir, the condition of those 2 hairs that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant that you found on the outside of the knit cap?
Well, the one on Q18 was just a fragment. It was a portion of a hair, head hair, and on Q8B1, it had a root. It also had what appeared to be a little tag on it.
What's a tag?
Well, a tag is a little extension of the root that is sometimes confused with follicular tissue. Follicular tissue is this part of the skin where the hair is actually attached. It's a harder substance. It just forms a little extension, and we call it tags.
Well, wouldn't the existence of that tag indicate that the hair had been pulled out?
Objection leading.
Sustained. Phrase the question.
With respect to whether or not the hair was forcibly removed or naturally shed, does that existence of that tag from the hair follicle have any significance in that determination?
No.
So the existence of that tag does not indicate necessarily that a hair was forcibly removed or not?
Does not indicate that. No.
What does it indicate?
It indicates it has a tag.
All right, we talked before about the why don't you take a seat for a minute, sir, and I'll put this down.
Yes. Right.
We were talking earlier, I believe, about primary and secondary transfer. Do you recall that, sir?
I do.
Now, do you have an opinion, sir, concerning whether or not the hairs inside the blue knit cap that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant were deposited there by means of primary transfer, that is, wearing the cap, or secondary transfer, picking it up from somewhere else?
Object speculation.
Sustained.
Sir, does the existence of, in a general sense, does the presence of a number of hairs in a certain position on an item of clothing have significance to you with respect to whether or not it is the hairs got there by primary or secondary transfer?
Objection speculation. Over.
Well, on the inside of undershorts, I might think that that's probably a primary transfer.
Okay.
On the inside of a hat, I would also expect to see, logically, a primary transfer.
Then in that regard, sir, with respect to the 9 or 10 hairs that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant inside the knit cap, do you have an opinion as to how those hairs got there by primary or secondary transfer?
Objection speculation. Over.
Because hats are worn on the head, as we all know, and in combining that with the transfer or loss of hair, it's certainly consistent and reasonable to believe that their presence indicates that they came from a wearer of the hat, yes.
Now, you indicated that you also found a hair on the shirt of Ron Goldman. Can we cut the feed, please, Your Honor? 43F. Do you know where on the shirt that that hair was recovered?
I do not.
Can you describe the hair that you found that was recovered from Ron Goldman's shirt?
It was a very short head hair fragment.
Was it suitable for comparison?
I thought so, yes.
And did you cause a photograph to be taken of that hair that was recovered from Ron Goldman's shirt?
I did, and it was part of the last exhibit.
I think you indicated before that it is so labeled. It's Q23.
That's correct.
Can you please point that out, sir?
I'd be glad to. The photograph on the lower right-hand portion of the chart, second from the right, are labeled as Q23 hair from Goldman's shirt. That's a photograph, again, about 250 times magnification of that hair.
Now, you indicated earlier there was an elimination standard board in which you indicated there was hair of African-American lab and crime scene police personnel whose hair was taken for purposes of comparison.
Right.
Did you compare their hairs to this Q23 hair
No.
found on Ron
I
Goldman's
didn't get
shirt?
anything yet.
I compared all of the
Don't know.
questionnaires with all of the elimination.
I just don't know.
It included Q23.
That elimination head hair samples board was previously marked as people's
478.
478. Thank you, Ron. All right, now you compared then the hairs of Sandra Claiborne, Jean Braggs, and Claudine Ratcliffe and Don Thompson, as shown on that board, to the hair found on Ron Goldman's shirt, which you labeled on people's 481 Q23.
I did, yes.
And what was your opinion concerning whether or not any of their hairs were consistent with the Q23 hair found on Ron Goldman's shirt?
The question hair recovered from Ronald Goldman's shirt, Q23, could not have originated from these individuals,
And on what do you base that opinion, sir?
based upon a comparison of the microscopic characteristics that were exhibited by the known standards and the question hair.
Well, can you explain, sir, why you concluded that Sandra Claiborne's hair, as depicted on people's 478, could not have been the source of the Q23 hair on people's 481?
Well, besides the fact that the photographs look different, I didn't base it solely on this. I looked at the entire hair and the characteristics of the entire sample.
Are there
But it's
some
much darker. It's much darker in pigmentation, and it's quite a bit larger
larger?
in diameter. It's
Thicker?
thicker than most of the hairs that I was seeing.
Is that a characteristic that you also compare, sir, thickness?
Yes, it is.
What about the hair of Jean Braggs? Does that look...
I went
Can you explain to us
to
why
Dutch Wonderland
you allowed
yesterday,
Jean
but not
Braggs as a
really.
possible source?
So I'm off work for a bunch of days. So I decided to do DoorDash last night, right? And I had to take an order from Red Lobster to the Cartoon Network Hotel, which is right beside Dutch Wonderland. The Cartoon Network Hotel is exactly what you think it is. The Cartoon Network. And you walk in and there's mascots walking around. There's like, everything is like, there's game rooms and play areas and like there's the different cartoons in all around. There's like sculptures of all the cartoons coming out of the walls and on the signs sliding, and it was cool because DoorDash, it gave me two different, it said leave at the lobby and then it said take to room 226. So I didn't know which one I was supposed to do. So I went into the lobby first, and it was so cool. I mean, there was just so much going on, and there's kids running around everywhere, and there's these mascots and everything all over the place. It was really cool. I had a good time, and because it was Red Lobster, it was a good tip.
Of the hair found that you labeled a Q23.
Could I step down?
Please, I'm sorry.
Okay, with Jean Braggs, One of the characteristics I mentioned before was pigment clumping. You see a prominent pigment clumping or patching in a couple different areas. Also some streakiness of the tissue that's found in the very center of the hair. It's just an area that represented some of the characteristics that were present in Gene Bragg's head hair standard. But again, the comparison is not by photographs, it's an overall process. The curl of the hair, the buckling that appears in the hair shaft, the diameter or thickness of the hair, the appearance of the tip, the appearance of the root, all of these things are thrown into this comparison process besides this 250 magnification piece of the hair, which is quite small.
Did you have any further remarks to make about the distinctions you drew between Sandra Claiborne's hair and the Q23 hair?
Well, there is a little buckle here. I don't know if you saw that. There's a little indentation. With black individuals, the hair shaft may tend to twist on itself a little bit, and it's called buckling. It's just a characteristic that is found within that group of individuals. The one-sided pigmentation you don't quite see. It wasn't present on all of the defendant's hairs, but it was a prominent characteristic. But again, it did not exhibit the same characteristics as the defendant's hairs.
Or the Q23
Or
hair?
Q23.
Now, you can have a seat for a moment, sir. All right, referring you back, sir, to People's Exhibit 475. It's an atlas of the photographs that you brought from the FBI depicting 16 different individuals of black origin. You indicated, sir, that you prepared this in order to show us, demonstrate for us, the variation that you can find.
That's correct.
Well, it would appear that the lower, let me see if I can count it down. At the bottom row, as I face it from left to right, it would appear that the third one to the right looks just like the photographs that you
Yeah, I know, it is.
known samples
It's good to have
of
a
the
Dutch
defendant
Wonderland
and the,
hotel.
photographs of the evidence, some of the evidence hairs that were recovered from the blue knit cap.
Overruled.
Well, it is the hair from the defendant. I included that in the exhibit.
Okay, can you please point out to the jury the hair exactly that you're referring to and that I've referred to?
Yeah. The hair on the lower right-hand portion, third hair, photographed from the left-hand side. That was a known sample of hair from the defendant's hair sample.
Thanks.
What was our exhibit number on that, Ms. Clark?
475, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. The 16 individuals board was 464. We now show this board, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
May I? Now, sir, is your finding, if I may reveal the results on the results board pertaining to defendant. Is your finding, sir, of a head hair that exhibits the same microscopic characteristics as those found in the defendant's hair, would you say that that was consistent with the defendant having had some physical contact with Ronald Goldman?
I object, that's speculation.
Sustained. It's a vague question.
You earlier spoke to us about primary, secondary transfer of hairs. When individuals have contact through a violent struggle, have you, in your past experience, found the hairs of the attacker on the clothing of the victim?
Objection. That's rather than past experience speculation.
Yes, I have. And that's why I look at clothing from victims of crime.
And is your finding of a head hair consistent with the hairs of those of the defendant on Ronald Goldman's shirt, consistent with the defendant having attacked Ronald Goldman on the night of June the 12th?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Is it consistent with the defendant having had contact with Ronald Goldman?
Same objection.
Sustained.
Is the finding of a head hair on the shirt of Ronald Goldman consistent with those hairs of the defendant, consistent with a primary transfer from the head of the defendant to the shirt of Ronald Goldman?
Probably more so towards secondary type transfer as opposed to primary.
Please explain.
Well, a primary transfer would best be demonstrated by hair that's been forcibly removed that has a root that indicates it may have come out during a struggle. That's probably the best way to do that, to make that determination. A hair fragment, on the other hand, would more likely be found on the exterior clothing of an individual and to have been transferred in that way. That would be more, what I would think would be more likely explanation as a secondary transfer as opposed to primary.
And you indicated to us earlier, sir, that it's very common to find the hairs of a person on his own clothing.
It's very common, yes.
Then would the finding of the hair fragment that exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as those of the defendant on Ron Goldman's shirt be consistent with the defendant having grabbed Ron Goldman from behind, wrapping his left arm around him in an effort to stab him with the right hand, in which his clothing would come into contact with the shirt of Ronald Goldman?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
All right, would you expect to find hairs from an attacker on clothing of the victim if there was no bodily physical contact between them?
Objection, ask for sidebar.
Overruled.
I wouldn't expect to find anything if there was no physical contact. It's possible that hairs may be blown off of clothing, but it's more reasonable to believe that the actual physical contact results in the transfer, especially of hairs.
Thank you.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we take our recess for the day, I just wanted to take this opportunity to call to your attention Ms. Jennifer Fitzpatrick, who is back in the back there. She's been our operator of our whiz-bang, what we call the whiz-bang system. This is our fancy media system. And as you know, so far this trial, in over 5 months or 6 months, we've only had one foul-up, and that was when the power died, and that wasn't her fault. And she is going to be returning to her law firm of Deutsche
No,
Stiles
sanctions.
in the Big Easy. She's from New Orleans, and she'll be returning there. Ms. Fitzpatrick, I want on behalf of the parties in the court, thank you for your service. All right.
I haven't had eggs Benedict in so long.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Diedrich, you can step down. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Don't get burned by any fireworks. Don't let anybody communicate with you. Have a nice holiday weekend. All right, we'll stand in recess. Council, I have some other matters to attend to Monday morning. We'll stand in recess.
Goodbye, June. Goodbye, June.
10:30.
We're in
thank
July 5th, guys.
Back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Bailey, Mr. Blazier.
Oh my gosh.
People are represented by Ms. Clark, Mr. Darden, and Mr. Escobar. Jury is not present. Counsel, anything we need to take up before we invite the jurors to rejoin us?
Yes, Your Honor, the court instructed us to prepare photographs of the crime scene of Bundy in the manner in which it currently appears, and I've done so. I give a copy of these photographs to the defense, and this is the court's copy. Would you like
All
me
right,
to give it to the clerk?
why don't you give it to the clerk, and I'll take a look at it when we're in recess. Thank you, counsel.
Your Honor, I believe last week you instructed the defense to provide us with a witness list this morning.
I don't see Mr. Douglas. Mr. Shapiro, are we anticipating
whoa.
Mr. Douglas's arrival
Wait,
shortly?
wait. What did he just say? What did Darden just say? You instructed the defense to provide us with a witness list this morning. That's what he just said, right? I'm not stupid. I'm very stupid, but sometimes I listen. I don't listen. He probably said something about a dog, and I just made all that up in my head.
Person appointed by the defense to handle those discovery matters, but I anticipate we should resolve that this morning. All right. As to what issue?
Good morning, Your Honor.
As to what issue, Counsel?
We just wanted a clarification on the court's ruling regarding Mr. Harmon not being allowed to contact Mr. Mullis. It seemed pretty specific to us.
Not
And
again.
it seemed as if
Come
that would not
on.
prohibit the people from sending letters to other experts to invite them to interview with our
That was a
office.
specific request by Dr. Mullis not to be contacted any further.
That's all we wanted to clarify.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Your Honor, the witness currently giving evidence has some colored charts which relate to color absorption across the spectrum graphs. And I'm just wondering if we have received all that he has, because we'd like to copy them in color. The ones we have are black and white, and they really don't tell us what we'd like to know.
Do you have those available? Do you have copies available, Mr. Dietrich? All right, Mr. Bailey, do you want some additional time to take a look at them, or are you prepared to go forward?
We'd like to take a look at them, and we'd like to make copies at Kinko's or somewhere during the noon recess. I think there may be some we haven't seen before.
All right, Ms. Clark tells me that you've seen everything she's got. All right, then we'll talk about making copies available over the lunch hour.
I have an idea these things may be displayed this morning.
I assume
No, okay.
Mr. Morton and Mr. Dietrich were just comparing notes, and Mr. Morton has more charts than we do currently here. So
I have one that she didn't have with him, and there are some we don't have, or at least I don't have.
you don't have?
All right, well, we'll play trading cards with these exhibits at the noon hour.
I don't intend to use the charts, and if any change in that occurs, we'll approach the bench and I'll let counsel.
All right, anything else? All right, let's have the jurors, please.
Yes, Baba, you're going to have to listen to the last 4 weeks all over again until you find it. I got excited and forgot I had a job to do.
All right, good morning again, Mr. Dietrich. Good morning. Mr. Dietrich, sir, you are reminded that you are still under oath, and Ms. Clark, you may continue with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Mr. Dietrich, where we left off, we were talking about a hair consistent with those of the defendant found on Ronald Goldman's shirt. You recall that?
I do, yes.
Now, I would like for you to assume the following facts for the purpose of a hypothetical. If you would, sir, please assume that at some time in the morning hours of June the 13th, after 10 a.m., a detective placed a white blanket over the body of Nicole Brown, and that blanket was never placed over the body of Ronald Goldman. Okay?
Okay.
Now, if that blanket contained the head hairs of the defendant, where would you be most likely to find those hairs if they were to transfer from the blanket to any other place? I'm talking about the blanket that was on the body of Nicole.
Or
Okay. The most likely individual that may have the hair or hairs from another individual that is from that blanket would have been Nicole Brown, since she had direct contact with the blanket, as based on your information.
Okay. And if that blanket was never placed on the body of Ronald Goldman, what is the likelihood that any hairs that may have been present on that blanket would transfer from the blanket onto his body?
sustain.
If the
Problem with the question, counsel, is likelihood.
likelihood, okay. In your experience, sir, when an article of clothing or a blanket is responsible for a hair or fiber transfer, in your experience, have you commonly found that the hair or fiber flies onto some other object or body with which it has no direct contact.
Grounds?
Not showing his expertise in crime scene investigation.
Vogel?
Okay. From my experience of examining evidence that's submitted from crime scenes, the individuals most likely to have evidence of hair or fiber transfer would be those individuals that had some contact with an item, such as body bags we often get in, blankets and transport sheets that are often submitted along with other items from the victims. That's where you generally see the contact and generally see the fiber or hairs transferred. It's just common sense.
Now, you did examine the hair and fiber removed from the body and clothing of Nicole Brown,
I did.
and did you find any hairs consistent with those of the defendant on her body or clothing?
I did not.
And if the blanket had been the source of the head hair you found on Ronald Goldman's shirt that was consistent with the defendant's, where would the most likely place to find it? Where would the most likely place you would expect to find it be?
Objections, back, please.
Sustained. Counsel problem is likely.
In your experience, where would you expect to find that hair if the blanket was the source of it?
Vogel?
Well, if the blanket is covered with hairs from an individual or from any other source, and that blanket comes in contact with a person, or the clothing of that person, because of primary transfer and secondary transfers that are going on, that person would be the most likely candidate to have a hair on the clothing of that individual.
By the way, did you find any head hairs on Nicole's body or clothing that were consistent with the head hairs of Ronald Goldman?
I did not.
Sir, if a stabbing occurs in which the victim offers little or no resistance, and there's primarily arm's-length contact, what impact does that have on whether or not there will be hair or fiber transfer to the body or clothing of that victim?
Sustained.
All right, sir, is the lack of any hairs consistent with those of Ronald Goldman or those of the defendant consistent with her having been rapidly incapacitated and murdered while unconscious?
Sustained.
How would you explain the lack of any hairs consistent with those of Ronald Goldman or any other foreign hairs consistent with those of her attacker, perhaps, on the body of Nicole Brown?
Objection calls for speculation.
My problem with that was foundation regarding his expertise to tell us that.
Sir, you processed, I think you told us before, 4,000 hair and fiber cases in your time.
Around 4,000 cases. I've also done crime scene investigation, too.
Would you please explain to us, sir, what you've done in that connection?
Well, within the area of crime scene investigation, I have attended a course at the FBI Academy on how to examine crime scenes and collect evidence from crime scenes. I also lecture National Academy individuals, in-service agents taking training at the Academy, people that come through the Hair and Fiber School down at the FBI Academy, and other people on how to collect evidence at a crime scene. So I am familiar with the collection and preservation of physical evidence, and I'm also familiar with what an individual might expect to find on clothing items or blanket items or other items that are recovered at a crime scene. And knowing what one might expect to find helps in the actual examination of a crime scene so that the evidence can be collected properly.
Then in light of that and your expertise, sir, in hair and fiber examinations, on how many occasions have you examined the clothing, hair and trace recovered from the clothing and bodies of stabbing victims?
Well, many times, many times.
And on any of those occasions, were you aware of the facts of the case in terms of how the stabbing occurred?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
In any of those cases, was there a confession, for example?
Sustained.
In those, based on that experience, sir, and the knowledge you acquired from those cases, can you tell us whether the lack of any foreign hairs on the body and clothing of Nicole Brown is consistent with her having been rapidly incapacitated and murdered while unconscious?
Vogel? On the request to approach, the objection to the question, however, sustained.
How do you explain, or how can you account for the lack of foreign hairs or fibers on the body of Nicole Brown?
Well,
Calls for speculation.
Vogel?
the lack of hair and fiber evidence would indicate to me that there was limited contact with a surface that contained either hair or textile fibers. The less the amount of contact, the less the force of the contact would result in less evidence being found.
All right, now I think you said earlier that you found some limb hairs of black origin collected from the evidence in this case?
I did, yes.
And by limb hairs, I think you defined it before as from the hand or the arm or the leg.
That's correct.
And which items of evidence revealed black limb hairs?
That would have been Ron Goldman's shirt as well as the glove recovered at Rockingham.
Now, did you receive any limb hair samples from the defendant?
I did not.
What is your habit and custom with respect to the comparison of limb hairs?
Well, they're not routinely compared in a forensic laboratory because of their limited nature.
What do you mean by that, limited nature?
Well, limb hairs do not have enough individual microscopic characteristics like head hairs and pubic hairs for me to say, or for forensic examiners to say, that this person is a likely candidate of this particular hair as being the source. There's too much overlap that we find. There's some broad conclusions that can be reached. That is, a person with blonde limb hair is going to look different than an individual that has black-colored limb hair. It's possible to distinguish race in some instances, but they're not as good as head and pubic hairs for comparison purposes.
What kind of reliability is there then in the conclusion that you reached concerning the race of the limb hair you found on Ron Goldman's shirt and the Rockingham glove?
These are all just pieces of information that are collected from the analysis of trace evidence. That is, the little bits and pieces that may have been exchanged during some contact between the assailant and the victims, and from the clothing that they may have worn. It's just another piece of evidence, piece of information.
Okay, and is the conclusion you reached, the result you reached, concerning the racial origin of that limb hair on Ron Goldman's shirt and the Rockingham glove, is that reliable?
Yes. Yes, the identification's fine as far as I'm concerned.
Where on the Rockingham glove was the limb hair found?
That was on the inside.
Were there any were there any head hairs of black origin found inside the Rockingham glove?
There was a head hair fragment, yes. It was not suitable for meaningful comparison purposes.
And that's because you could not compare it because...
Well, it was a fragment that was called opaque. That is, it's black, and you cannot actually pass light through it enough so that you can look at the internal microscopic characteristics.
Sir, if an African-American individual were to wear those gloves, the Rockingham glove in specific, would that be consistent with the limb hair that you found inside the Rockingham glove?
It would.
And again, if the attacker, if the murderer of Ron Goldman were an African-American individual, would that be consistent with the limb hair you found on his shirt?
Yes, it would.
Right, now we've talked a little bit about your experience in previous stabbing cases, sir, and I wanted to ask you, is it common in your experience to find head hair transfers in stabbing cases?
It's not very common from my experience, no.
And why is that?
Well, certain types of cases don't lend themselves well for a transfer of hair evidence. Cases like a sexual assault case where you have bed sheets and clothing and worn by the individuals are often probably the better items of evidence to collect hair and fiber material from. They're large items. They tend to hold the hair and fiber for a longer period of time. But in stabbing cases, I just haven't seen it. And I would have expected, in stabbing cases, being violent as they are, that I would find a lot of hair transfers, such as head hair transfers, but I just don't see it. Once in a while you do, but it's uncommon.
And under what circumstances, in what cases did you have head hairs and fibers for comparison in a stabbing case?
Specific cases?
No, generally, what circumstances?
Well, any
But it's vague.
It is vague.
Yeah, I'm not real clear, but any stabbing case that is submitted to the laboratory for analysis to determine if there are hair or fibers that may have been exchanged, they come in from all around the country, from mostly local and state police agencies, but we also investigate crimes on government reservations and Indian reservations that come under our jurisdiction that involve often very violent crimes.
When proof that the question was vague, let me ask a more specific one. In stabbing cases, let me ask you this. In prior stabbing cases, have you had a situation where items of clothing of the perpetrator were left behind?
Yes, that has happened. That's probably the best example of where you might
No,
find
feet
hair
are too
evidence
far
or fiber
away.
evidence
They're way down
rather
there.
than on the clothing itself
No way.
of the victims.
I can reach my hair.
And an example of that in this case, like the knit cap that was found at Ron Goldman's feet.
Well, this is an example of an item that would be of extreme value from my standpoint for the presence of hair and fiber evidence, because it may be something left behind by the assailant. Not knowing information about a case, the laboratory examiner, like myself, would identify the materials, not knowing if the hat or glove or any other item belonged to anybody. There's no information that's given to me. It was just submitted to me for analysis. But in a struggle, this may occur, and that gives us the best information. And often that's what I end up testifying about. After bank robberies, they drop clothing. After violent crimes, they drop clothing. Or if they may try to discard and get rid of clothing, and they discover the clothing. Those are good examples.
Sustained. Ask another question.
Yes. All right, let's move on to fiber. Did you do some fiber examinations in this case, sir?
I did.
With regard to those fiber examinations you conducted in this case, did you examine Ron Goldman's shirt?
Yes, I did.
Okay, Your Honor, I'd like to mark the next chart. I think we left off with...
482.
Was it 482? Is that next one? People's... Great. The photograph being shown on the screen, Your Honor, is from this board.
All right, I'll need that on my monitor as well.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you tell us, first of all, sir, what kind of fibers the shirt of Ron Goldman is made of?
They're made of cotton fibers, primarily two colors, an off-white and
Son of a gun.
brownish color, light brown.
And I just got excited because we finally made it to July, but this guy is still here for at least 3 more days. Sorry, guys, but we still just at least minimum 3 more days of this guy.
When you examined the fibers collected from the glove at Rockingham, did you find any fibers that match the fibers on Ron Goldman's shirt?
Sustained. You're not going to approach, though.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
Proceed.
When you examined the Rockingham glove, did you find any fibers that were consistent with the fibers of Ron Goldman's shirt?
I did.
And what did you base your conclusion on, sir?
Well, a bit of microscopic comparison.
When you examined the fibers collected from the glove at Bundy, did you find any fibers that were consistent with the fibers on Ron Goldman's shirt?
I did, yes.
And what method of comparison did you use for that?
That would have been the same, a microscopic comparison.
Were there any other items at the crime scene that you found that were found to contain fibers consistent with those of Ron Goldman's shirt?
That would have been the knit hat that was recovered at the crime scene.
And again, what method of comparison did you use for that?
Microscopic comparison.
All right, so now, off-white cotton fibers, isn't that fairly common?
It is common, yes. Yes.
Was there something about the appearance of these particular fibers that you found on the Rockingham and Bundy gloves and on the knit cap that strengthened your opinion that those fibers were consistent with those of Ron Goldman's shirt?
Well, there did appear to be blood on these fibers, which is tended to place, to me, a little bit more significance. The fact that they're off-white cotton does not have significance, but the fact that they appear to have blood and maybe in some way linked to the event, I felt they were important.
Did you cause photographs to be taken of the fibers that were collected from the Rockingham and Bundy gloves and the knit hat that you determined to be consistent with the fibers of Ron Goldman's shirt?
I did, yes.
Next board, we have, as to be marked, People's 483, entitled Known Cotton Fibers from Ron Goldman's Shirt. All right, Mr. Diedrich, if you wouldn't mind stepping down with the pointer. Can you tell us, first of all, the photos at the top that are labeled K18, can you tell us what that is?
K18, this is the specimen number for the shirt. That was the number that we gave it in the FBI laboratory. The off-white cotton fibers are represented in the upper left-hand portion of the chart, again marked K18. On the right-hand portion of the chart, they're the brownish-colored fibers that make up the shirt that Ronald Goldman wore that evening. And again, that's also marked K18. The bottom photographs, I have 6 photographs in all, and they are so labeled as to where the fibers originated. The first photograph I took from Goldman shirt Q23 to give you an idea of what the fibers looked like from actually debris that came off of this shirt. Q3B is the center photograph. It's from the right glove. That's the glove from Rockingham. Q1 from, again, the glove from Rockingham, which is to the right of that photograph. Q8B2 is from the knit hat, and that would have been, if I'm correct, that's the outside of the hat. Q7C from the left glove, that's the glove from Bundy. And Q47,
You know what,
knit hat as
Jude?
well, and I believe that's from the outside.
I don't ever have to do penance ever again. Ever. I'm never going to. Never, never, never. I quit that. Quit it cold
Q47
turkey.
fiber, was that part of the Q47? That's part of the debris that you yourself collected from the hat?
Right, that would have been the debris that I processed from the hat in the laboratory.
Thank you, sir. And if I may, Your Honor, I'd like to review the result. All right, Mr. Diedrich. If the murderer of Ron Goldman, wearing the gloves found at Bundy and Rockingham, and the knit cap found at Bundy, attacked and stabbed Ronald Goldman through his shirt, would those set of events be consistent with the fibers of Ron Goldman's shirt that you found on the Bundy and Rockingham gloves and on the knit cap?
It would be consistent, especially since there would be damage to the fabric, damage to the shirt. It would cause a greater loss of fibers.
And if the murderer wearing those gloves and knit cap were to have held Ronald Goldman from behind with his left arm and his left hand in contact with Ronald Goldman's shirt, might that account also for the fibers consistent with Ron Goldman's shirt that were found on the Bundy glove?
Misleading.
Okay. Can you tell us, sir, well, in terms of, I'll frame a hypothetical, assume the following, that the murderer attacked Ronald Goldman by holding him from behind with his left arm, wearing the Bundy glove, and that the Bundy glove was in contact with Ronald Goldman's shirt. Can you tell us whether that set of events, hypothetical, would be consistent with your findings of the fibers on Ronald Goldman's shirt, the fibers consistent with those of Ronald Goldman's shirt on the Bundy glove?
If the glove, for instance, came in actual contact with the shirt, and the glove had any type of fluid on it, possibly blood, that would be an excellent source of the fiber being present because of the actual contact. The glove, a dry glove, is not going to hold on to fibers like a damp glove would. And the fiber, I believe, did appear to have blood on
I
it.
think you get your hair from your
From
mom.
the Bundy glove as well?
Don't you?
Yes.
Now, Ronald Goldman's shirt was long sleeved, was it not?
Yes, it was.
Assume, again, for the purpose of a hypothetical, sir, that if in the struggle Ron Goldman reached behind him to grab his attacker and grab the knit cap off of his head, would that account for the fibers from his shirt, the fibers consistent with Ron Goldman's shirt, being found on the knit cap?
Again, if the fabric from the victim's shirt came in physical contact with the hat, certainly that would be a logical explanation for the fibers being present on the hat.
Now, are you saying that's the only logical explanation that there could be for that finding?
No, it's just a reasonable explanation based on what I see.
And is it also based, sir, on your judgment and your experience and expertise over these last 17 years?
Well, again, that's why I look at clothing items that are submitted from victims and suspects in cases, because of transfer that can occur between them during physical contact. It can be easily explained by identifying these materials and then doing comparisons. And seeing that over the years supports the contention that you're bringing here, that when two objects do come in contact, there is a good chance that material can be exchanged.
Okay. That's a good thing to know. When two objects come into contact, there's a good chance that material can be exchanged. Okay, guys, we made it. We made it through another day. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for coming out. Go buy 2 Christmas presents today, and then put them in your closet, and you'll feel better in December. Okay? Bye, guys. Thank you. See you soon.